maybe
Session, not yet.
September or,
February?
yeah, to just give an update on how this fair went and update that.
Submit. There's a request for fundraising.
Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'll call the budget work session for August 12th, 2021 to order.
That would be cool.
And with that, we'll start with Nick.
Oh, I think they want the.
All right, first thing, we do have county extension listed here as our first topic, as they are part of our administrative services budget line item. I would like to include them with the admin portion rather than having them come separate. We do have all the senior managers and business managers and a number of other staff here to talk through the different budget aspects for each area. And since Susan is under that category, we'd like to include her in that area rather than as the first agenda item.
Okay.
Starting with our budget. For 2022, the initial requests that were brought before us that we discussed at the last budget committee meeting were at 10.85% or a $4.478 million ask for levy. That was our starting point. Between that time frame of last month and today, SMT has met 3 times, and they were able to bring that request down to a 3.99% or a $1.646 million increase to levy for 2022. It was very good progress made. There were a lot of departments that made some significant changes to their budget requests for next year in order to get to that, but we're confident that everything that is in that budget is doable, something that they can perform on, and limits our growth in that levy side of things. Starting with general fund, next slide. We are looking at a 6.34% increase to the levy revenue for 2022. That's $1.5 million in this area. Part of this has a $200,000 inflator in here that is actually a transition from CIP getting $1.7 million, taking that down to 1.5 and reallocating that to the general fund to help us mitigate some of the growth that's occurring in general fund. And it also puts us in a long-term position for CIP that we'll talk about as we get towards the end here. Within general fund, we have governance services, the sheriff's office, admin services, land services, and then our non-departmental, which is all of our revenues that aren't allocated directly to a department. Some of the major drivers for the expense side, for the revenue side, are our insurance projections, and that kind of carries through every one of the departments. We do forecast a 10% growth in our health insurance costs year over year. Our average over the last 5 years has been 10%. We've had significant ups where we've had 19% increases, and we've had zeros. So this projection does take into account a 10%. We are starting to get some information back for quotes for our health insurance that may see us be able to reduce that, but that has to go before our benefits committee, and there's a lot of discussion that needs to occur yet before we know exactly what those numbers are. So at this point, it's projected at 10% growth for health insurance. We also have some impacts in here. Our net non-levy revenues are up $440,000 from prior year, but there is reduced interest and investment income for 22. We're still seeing those historically low CD rates, investment rates. We are working with Bremer. We actually just met with them yesterday to start transitioning some things to our trust fund in order to try and gain more increases. For July, as an example, we had an average balance just over $30 million in the bank. We made $571 on our money market account for July. So we're looking at opportunities to try and increase that, but we expect that to continue being a challenge for us in the coming year, so we had to reduce those revenues as well. Within the general fund, we start with governance services first. I got to order from last night. There we go. Within governance services, we have the commissioners, veteran services, the administrator. The Gitchigami Library is actually included under governance services, and then the attorney's office. Here we see a 7.68% increase to expenses, $370,000. Again, the driver is insurance projections, but we also have significant backlogs in the court due to the pandemic, which actually has the attorney requesting an additional staff member to help with that backlog. And we'll talk about staffing towards the end. We have a full listing of all the new staffing for this budget that we can review. And at any point in time, if you have any questions on any one of these areas, staff is here to answer those questions. So if you have questions, jump
The
in.
library the same?
They did request an increase. That is actually later on, we do have the appropriations. They requested to go to $516,077. It is currently budgeted at the exact same amount because that is the one that we are statutorily required. If we increase it, that's the new base going forward.
So you're leaving it the same?
We have it budgeted. It's up to you as a board to
That
determine.
509 or 516 is the question.
It's 509,127 in the budget right now.
That's what my question was.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on governance services?
So what's the main driver on this? I guess I don't get it. Is it just the attorney or is it?
Insurance projections at the 10% are the primary
Insurance
driver.
what?
The insurance projections for healthcare are one of the primary drivers, and then the court backlog is actually requiring part of what they're requesting for new staffing. So that drives some of that growth because we'll have an additional staff members' expenses built in here as well.
Like how many staff people?
For this one, just the one for attorney's office.
No other staff in the other places? Veterans or?
No, there are no requests for additional staff within governance services.
It sure seems like a lot of money. It's, okay, so how much, it's an increase, what's the dollar amount? 40,000?
The increase is $370,000 for the expense side. That $40,000 is their non-levy revenues that they're getting. So forfeitures or other funds that they get in, those are up $40,000 for this budget.
That doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so even if it was just one person, even if it was $100,000, what's the other 270? That isn't insurance. I mean, it can't be for that.
The 10% insurance drives a significant amount of growth. Across the entire organization, it's just over $800,000.
Right,
for our
but this is
insurance.
just commissioners, veterans, administrator, and the attorney's office, right?
So that,
It's the rest of the growth too. Existing employee growth.
Wages and,
Wages
Yep.
and benefits, wages and fringe increase, plus whatever is new. The 370 is not just new position or anything like that. It's all of the existing growth forward, like the growth of those things.
still seems like high, seems high to me, but I guess. Is it broke down on this page here that you gave to us?
no, that one is the capital projects fund.
Okay.
Because senior
Is it-
managers got
It's
to.
not broke down?
Not in this one. Senior managers, because they got to this on Monday afternoon, well, we're not able to update the system quick enough to be able to give you that full detailed picture. Because we do have that secondary meeting scheduled for August 26th, we will provide more detail than what is here.
Yeah, because this is like the 50,000 foot
Yes.
view.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna need more, not right away, but we're not setting the preliminary levy today, okay.
No, we have till the end of September to set preliminary levy. So we'll have 2 more budget committee meetings before we get to that point.
Okay,
So there'll be plenty of opportunity. We want to just make sure, because they were able to get that 399, we really wanted you to have the opportunity to see how they were progressing, where some of those drivers are, and what that looks like across the organization as a whole.
so just, I know this is probably not the, but, okay, so that's almost 8%, but if senior management is coming in at 399, somebody's got to be cutting back. Where is that cutting back happening so that they can take that money from there and put it towards here?
As we progress forward through the different departments, you'll see some restrictions and limitations to how much the growth occurs in some different departments. We also have Sheriff's Office is currently projected to be down from where they were in 2021 for expenses, but we also see revenue growth throughout this timeframe too. Sheriff's Office is a good example. We have additional revenue projected for 2022 for Department of Corrections revenue. We anticipate that we may see staff or inmates coming back in from that source. We are seeing that out-of-county holds are increasing. There's more need with staffing requirements in other areas. Oops.
A projection for the, I thought the Department of Corrections was kind of taking all the prisoners that they had out of here. So have they indicated that now they're going to bring some more back in here, or they are?
Not a lot, and I don't think we budgeted a great deal additional for DOC. We did budget more of an increase for out-of-county holds, because what we are hearing is that other counties are having difficulty staffing their jail. Beltrami County comes to mind, and so they are boarding prisoners out because they can't staff their own jail. That's an opportunity for us.
And we are budgeting for that?
Fill the bed.
But we
got-
don't know, though.
We never do.
No.
We never do. You got the bed. Fill it.
Well, I agree with you, Tim,
That's-
but it's
that's the
just that
bottom
when you're gonna say that, I think this revenue is gonna come in, and then if you've plugged that in and you say, oh, we got into 399, using that possible scenario, I just don't, I don't know, it sounds kind of iffy. It sounds like,
The same thing we
sounds
do.
like lawyer math to me.
It's the same thing we do.
Attorney math, attorney math.
Same thing we've done every
sounds like
year for 27 years.
Oh,
You,
okay.
you are, when you're doing budgeting, you are projecting into the future.
Right.
And you are making your best guess about what that future will hold. And so it is our best guess of what we believe we can deliver. If we didn't think we could deliver it, we wouldn't have budgeted it.
So how much this year, would you know the answer to this, have we received in revenue from, not the DOC, but like other counties that are looking for, have we received revenue
Yes.
to that source?
We have, and we are trending ahead of what we have budgeted at this point.
How much is that?
Let me just get there for a second here.
I'm on my game today, so you can be ready for a lot of questions.
I think we were trending about 200,000 over budget. More revenue than what we budgeted in '21.
Okay.
That is part of that projection forward. If we delivered that in '21, we should be able to deliver it in '22. So what
That's a
I-
carry
we're
forward.
budgeting it to trend, plus a little bit of stretch.
But that's other counties other than Cass that we have a contract with.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So it could be Aiken, or it could be
Whoever.
whoever.
We'll take them.
If you don't have that right now, you can just email it.
Right now, out-of-county holds are 15,000 ahead through the end of July of where we projected. So we budgeted for 614,000 through July. We have 629,000 in revenue so far through the end of July.
That's from other counties. That's not DOC.
Nope, that's just other counties.
Really? Okay.
On the state
So
prisoner
how much is-
reimbursement
How
line,
much is the per diem per day, or how much is the bed rate? Do you know?
20?
So 55 into that, so that's a lot of bed days. How much would that be?
For every 10 beds for a year, that's $200,000.
Okay. Okay. It was quiet in here.
You ask questions, everybody goes, uh-oh. Admin services will be next. Within admin services, we have our general appropriations, so everything outside of Gitchigami Library is in our admin services section. We also have facilities, finance, elections, county extension, IT, and then human resources, all fall in this category. For our expenses on this side, we see a 1.91% increase. Uh-oh. Okay. Or a $130,000 increase from 21 to 22. We also do see increases in non-levy revenue. A major portion of that is us utilizing ARPA dollars to offset the cost of an additional staff member in finance to allow us to do the ARPA reporting. With the guidance that we've received thus far, there is a lot more complications to that reporting process, and it's going to be much more involved for our staff to do it. So we do have a request in for an additional staff member to help us with that through the course of ARPA. The other things driving that include the insurance projections, just like the other departments. But we also do have a CRM systems development need where we feel that there is an additional need for a staff member in our CRM development portion to help us get caught up with the development of the CRM, to do permitting and a multitude of other things throughout the county. And we'll discuss that as we get towards the end.
Okay, Nick, you said additional staff. Which departments are asking for additional staff and how many?
So total is 11.5 new staff members, and we do have that spread throughout community services, admin services, and land services.
Okay, so how many in each department is what I asked.
It's listed on, we do have a sheet later on that we get to, that actually has that all in there. And there's 6 for community services, 2 for admin services, and 3 for land services. Any questions on admin services? Okay. Moving on to the next department. Sheriff's Office. Sheriff's Office does include patrol, dispatch, investigations, emergency management, the admin, and the jail. Here we actually do see a reduction in expenses for 2022. It is down 1.15% or $200,000. Keep in mind these are round numbers. It's not exactly 200,000, but this is representative of what you are seeing so far. You do see that increase in non-levy revenue, the 19.92% or 500,000. That is the increases in jail revenue that we anticipate, as well as some increases in different licensing in other areas as well. Some of the primary drivers to change here, again, the insurance projections do drive up the overall expenses to get to where we're at. Even though we see that reduction, it still has a play in this whole process. They also, we did pull out the K-9 unit from the budget at this point, but I know the Sheriff's Office is very passionate about having the K-9 unit. So we did call that out, that is a potential driver. They would like to see that be put back into the budget. They have said that there may be some offsets that they can pull from other areas to offset that cost, so we stay at our 399. But I want to call that out to give them the opportunity if they want to discuss that, or if you want to discuss it, to talk about the K-9 unit a little bit as well.
How much?
There is $48,400 budgeted right now for the K-9 unit. That includes the purchase of the dog, the facilities needs for that, some of the training, and other aspects.
I guess a question, so I know there's K-9 units in other departments, obviously, and I would assume that I know for a fact when there's something serious, everybody comes, you know, Crow Wing County, Brainerd, Baxter. So why would you need a K-9 unit? Why wouldn't you try to work with your counterparts from other departments? Yeah, would you please? Yep.
So to answer your question best on that, the sheriff obviously was very adamant that the K-9 be in there. He's been very passionate since he took office 3 years ago of getting us a drug detection dog as well as a people searching dog, not a bite dog like you might traditionally think of a K-9 in law enforcement. Why we can't draw from other agencies, we do, and they would draw from us, but there are many times throughout a given year where we have a need for that tool. The Brainerd Police Department has a dog, and their handler lives up in the northern part of the county. Baxter is without a trained dog right now. They're working on getting a dog up and trained. And the Crosby Police Department has a dog. I'm not sure what its capabilities are. But it's really to say the Sheriff's Office wants to be the lead on these kinds of programs because we encompass all 4 county or corners of the county, and we can't always rely on our other partners being available, and really vice versa. So with the drug trends off the charts, we look at this as a huge necessity for a tool for law enforcement in this county.
You haven't had one for quite some time, so I'm just curious of why and what I think you just answered my question. You're saying that the drugs pouring in are increasing, or?
Correct. I've been with this office 21 years, as you probably know, Commissioner, and the drug numbers are at crisis level statewide. We're taking off pounds, not daily, but several times a month, which is unheard of. It means the market is flooded with drugs, and we need other tools besides people to help keep those drugs out of our county.
Where are these drugs coming from? Is it, I don't think, being that we put the precursor stuff behind the counter, I don't think people are cooking meth. Is it coming over the border, or where's it coming from?
Yeah, it's not made traditionally like it was 20 years ago, or they're doing it in their backyard. It's being infiltrated into the country, primarily from Mexico, Southwest United States, places like that, in large amounts. And the market is so flooded, the prices have come down, addiction. There's a whole bunch of equations as to why that is, but nationwide it is a crisis level.
So then the dog would be, if you've got a car and somebody doesn't submit to letting you search the car, if the dog smells drugs, then legally can you search the car?
Correct. Yep. And it goes even beyond that, Commissioner. Working with our school partners, we go into the schools at various times and we do that.
Okay.
And not just drugs. We want this particular dog to be trained to help us find people as well. Because there are times throughout the year, several times, where a missing child wanders off, somebody maybe with medical issues, dementia, et cetera. It's just a quick tool to help us get on the ground and work towards resolving those issues.
So almost $50,000. So is that the total cost that it would cost for a year for the dog, for the training, for the dog food, for the housing of the dog? That's what it costs per year to have?
That's the best estimate we have, is that would be all baked into that number.
First year expense, though, Commissioner. The second year wouldn't be as much because we have additional.
Thank you.
costs that we have.
Yes. Yeah, the purchase of the dog would not carry over year to year. We would have the ongoing expenses like you mentioned.
Right, okay. Is somebody stepped forward and said, hey, I want to be the K-9 officer? Or?
We've identified multiple people in our office. We've got a lot of young up-and-coming deputies, some with good experience coming in from other agencies that have expressed an interest in doing this. Some guys are very passionate about drug enforcement, and that's obviously the people we'd want to team up this dog with.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Before you leave, explain the bomb squad needs.
So the Bomb Squad is a program that's been around in the sheriff's office. We've kind of spearheaded it since the late 1980s. Skip Rudquist, who's a retired sheriff's lieutenant, started that with the Brainerd Police Department. Since we've lost people through attrition, most recently Deputy Scott Freeze, he was one of our most recent retirees in June. He was a bomb team member. That leaves us with only 3 bomb team members left to respond to the area that we're responsible for, which is Crow Wing County and the northern region of Minnesota. That entails the various robots and everything else. So if somebody from Beltrami County calls and say, we found some explosive device, dynamite, what have you, they would call on our agents, or our deputies, to respond and take care of that. Well, with 3, as you can imagine, it stresses us to the point where we have not had to turn anybody down, but it sometimes could delay us in doing that. So what we're asking is to add another bomb tech to that course, some of which is funded through grants over time. Some comes out of our budget, obviously, but we'd like to get it back up to a 4-person team to meet the obligations that we have in that division.
Okay. So it's not necessarily equipment, it's personnel?
Personnel, yep, personnel and training. It's, I think it's a 6-week training in Alabama that the person goes to get up and, get up and going. But that person could start mentoring with the current people who are part of that bomb disposal unit.
But that's not another employee, though. That's just
That's not
training.
another employee, yep. It's
So this is
taking,
just
It's a training cost.
Training expense.
taking a current deputy, putting him into the training so they can be qualified to respond for these needs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Also, impacting this budget, we do see some reductions in expenses for the jail, being less inmates in there, even as we progress forward and start adding those inmates back in. Some of the trend lines showed there's some opportunity for us to reduce some of those expenses over the long term. So there are some reductions to the jail's expenses for 2022. We also have that increased revenue playing into this one.
For example,
There was some line items, particularly in food service, as well as some of the inmate supplies that were budgeted 20, 30, 40,000 more than what our historical trends have been. So we did reduce some of those to bring them back down towards historical trends, so we aren't budgeting beyond what the actual needs are for the department.
not as many meals.
For 2021, there's been less meals, there's been less need for a lot of those supplies because we've had less inmates.
Supplies, like what?
What's all in your supplies?
Cleaning supplies, clothing needs, things of that nature.
Okay.
As we went through the '22 budget, we did look at a lot of the historical trends of what we've actually been spending versus what we've been budgeting. Areas where we saw that there was a significant gap between what was budgeted and what the actual expense trends have been, we did have departments try to bring those down towards more trends than having that cushion or that gap between what was budgeted and the actuals year over year. So there are a bunch of that, or is a bunch of that going on in many of these departments. JL did see some pretty significant shifts in some of those lines in order for us to be more in line with what our actual spends are.
Okay.
Any other questions on sheriff?
So the budget submittal from the sheriff's department is $200,000 less than it was last year.
Yes,
That's what you're saying.
expense side, yes.
Okay. That's a good thing. And I want to just say personally, thank you for that. Because if you remember last year, I kind of went off the edge when it was like 25%. And so I appreciate it very much. Looks good to me.
Next up is land services.
You know what, I got another question. So that 200, is that with the dog, the K-9 unit out?
No, or yes, with it out of the budget.
So if it was in, then it would be 150, right?
Potentially, we did talk,
Approximately.
What I've talked with the sheriff's office about is, and they just were not able to be at the SMT, and so just trying to share the pain around. So if it's not a reduction in the K-9 program, what I've asked them to do is find 46 grand somewhere else. And so if they want to build the K-9 program back in, I don't think that's an issue. I don't see
Can we
a problem
ration the
with that.
meals over here, or
And
2 meals a day?
You know, in my conversations with Andy yesterday and with Nick and his conversations.
Did
with
I
Dan,
say that out loud?
We think that's possible.
all right, land services is next. Within land services, we have the customer services area, the assessing services area, and environmental services area. Land services does also have the landfill and solid waste, but those are not levy-based, so they aren't in this conversation today. Here we see an increase of 9.12% in expenses for 2022. It's a $340,000 lift from 2021. Some of the demands here, there is additional staffing built in for land services. We do see increased demand for our recording services. So there is a customer service rep in this budget for the recording side to help them deal with the influx and try and stay within statutory requirements for us to turn those documents around. There is also an additional customer service rep for the counter due to increases in our permitting and the amount of touch points that we have to have for new construction and everything else going on in the county. They felt that there was a need for an additional customer service rep on that side as well. There is also an increase in demand for our parks and recreation side, so they do have a half-time seasonal environmental tech built in here as well to help deal with some of the requirements for keeping the parks clean, dealing with the vandalism, keeping everything presentable and up to date.
Can I ask Gary a question? Is it,
Absolutely.
so can you explain this? I thought we had a conversation about, and I apologize, I can't remember all this stuff all the time, but I thought we had a conversation about doing something, thinking outside of the box with the landfill and your idea about that. Did we ever go forward with that? And is this part of that, or how? Can
Yeah,
you
good morning,
explain-
Commissioner. The environmental technician, Nick was a little wrong on what he had just said. That's actually for permitting. So what we'd like to try is, it's really May through October that we get so overwhelmed with permits and enforcements when all these people are up, short-term rental activity, that can we find a niche where we get enough help during that season and we not necessarily need them in the winter months. So that's the reason for the half FTE. But yes, we did move forward with an environmental tech. We have staff now that work at the landfill in the recycling area, the mattresses, and our HHW area. And they also go out and clean our parks and keep our trails clean. And so they're very flexible staff. Staff seems to really enjoy not having to do the same thing. They like the variety. And I don't know if you guys have been to any parks lately. They are outstanding as far as cleanliness and just keep it up on trees blowing down, things like that. That just need to be handled.
So just explain, so the first one, I thought he said customer service. So is that like customer service, like somebody, another person behind the counter, so that when people come in and want a death certificate or marriage license, a permit, God only knows what else you do over there, you know, so is that what that person will be? Will be trained in all of that, or?
Yeah, correct. 2 customer services requests. One would be for that counter staff. We've had to dedicate 2 full-time staff just to keep up with the Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission applications. Last year we went up, I'll just give you a quick statistic here, 74% in the number of apps. This year, year-to-date, we're already up 62% from a 74% increase last year. So we really kind of went from we always had a staff dedicated, but we probably could, if you looked at all their time, maybe it was half or 3/4, and we could do some other stuff with that staff. Then we went to totally 1 staff was dedicated to that area. Now we're to 2 staff out of that counter team to just keep up with the influx and volume, leaving us somewhat short with all of our vitals, all of these special applications, whether it's homestead, disabled veterans, blind disabled, birth, death, marriage stuff. They're overwhelmed. Yep.
Well, I know, and I'm blowing our own horn here because I think we do things different here than our cousins. When I mean that, I mean cities and different government entities. I think, why do we ask people to take a customer survey? Because we care what they think, and we care about the service that we're providing. I do know that there's a government entity that's right that way, that permitting, they don't care. Whenever they get the permit done, they get the permit done. So what you're trying to do, I'm guessing that by this staff, you're saying you need that to provide the services that the people are asking for. When they come in, they want a permit. They don't want to say, you don't say, well, come back in 6 months, we'll have it ready for you. So that's your justification for wanting these people?
Correct. We would like to keep the same level of service that I think we've become known for, and I believe you guys would want.
Hope so.
And at the same time, really trying to show staff when the work volume really does go through the roof, our bosses listen and they can react to that. And I think that also would be good for morale. Now, that's just, I wanted to throw that out there because I think sometimes people don't believe that you guys are listening, but we all know you always are. This is a great opportunity to really react to this influx of new construction here, and the amount of people, it seems like, that want to get out of the cities and move up here is just phenomenal.
What's the percent of new construction this year?
I'm sorry, Tim, what was that?
What's the percent of new construction, increase in the tax base due to new construction?
It was almost, I think it was like 2.3%. It was 890 million. That was one of the largest years we've had since like 2003.
In 1 year.
1 year.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, we were pushing
that
over
2.3.
400 houses.
That's new tax base. You take this 2.99, or I'm sorry, the 3.99, I think you can subtract the new construction from that because that's new tax base. The remainder is what's getting divided across everyone else. And so I think the tax bite here is actually going to be quite low.
So another question, so in looking at this, that 340, is that all levy expense? Because I think some of those employees that you say are doing like the cleanup at the parks and stuff, that could come out of a non-levy fund, correct?
That still is a levy lift. To your point on, if you talk about the landfill, we actually reduced an FTE when we moved forward with the environmental technicians. We actually reduced an FTE this year.
Right.
Which I thought was great. We are budgeting, currently it would be around 9 FTEs just out of like our tax forfeited fund. We have other funds like environmental trust interest. We probably have 13 or 14 out of the 52 or 53 staff that are, if you added it all up, that are totally non-levy, that are paid out of outside funds. But after all that's said and done with the lift, increases to wages and stuff, that would be a levy lift.
So another question, I don't know that you have the answer to this, but back when we used to do it a different way, when there was a county auditor, county treasurer, recorder, assessor, I'm just wondering how many total employees we had then versus with it all combined together. Do you think you're still lower than that number? Don't you know that answer to that question?
I have a really good understanding how many, I still believe we're 13 staff less than when we started combining offices.
Okay. What about, I know we talked about this before, and like I said, I apologize, I can't remember everything that comes through this brain, but how about assessors? How does this county compare to other counties? How many assessors do you have? And then if we compared to some other counties that are kind of our size, I think we're pretty low on the amount of assessors that we have, aren't we?
Yeah, if you look at, everybody has these duties, and in that world, we look at how many properties per assessor, right? And then you kind of, if you wanted to look out at, I think you mentioned the cousins or the other counties, we are right about 8,000 properties per assessor. That's improved and unimproved properties. Average countywide is around 4,000. So the staff here, I can safely and 100% honestly say, do twice the amount of work of most counties in this state. And it's not because we're getting to where, that's a different discussion, but we have leveraged real good technology and different ways of doing things to achieve, I believe, what is excellence. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think we should be proud, but we also should be aware that, we're blazing a trail that not a lot of counties are willing to even go.
Yeah. Gary, what kind of, if you've got 13 less employees, what kind of growth have you had since the combination of this?
We're over 4,000 new houses since Land Services was combined. We haven't added any assessors to that. Now, we have tweaked and leveraged technology and recrafted different positions to try to get some specialization in there to handle some of those volumes. On average, from a recording standpoint, around 17,500 on a kind of an average. We're up over 19,000, 21,000. We're on pace this 23,000 last year, and we're on pace for 25,000 documents Huge increase in volume just in that. And the amount of calls, it's awesome when people, we're known for great service. And I think Tim ever wanted to share, he heard stories yesterday that people call from other counties that want to deal with us for birth certificates or for, can I homestead through you guys? Because they don't want to deal with other counties, and it is what it is. I wear that on my sleeve. I think we should be known for being the best. I know that's arrogance or whatever, but we're not here to be second place. We're here to be first place. But we've had tremendous growth, Commissioner Brecken.
So one more question, Mr. Chair, on this one. So I'm assuming that you really feel like you need these people. I mean, to provide the services that I think the county board expects. So you wouldn't be coming and just saying, oh, I need 4 more people, just to make it easier. You're doing it because you feel like you need it. Is that? Would you say that?
If I can answer it this way, this is how I am. When you guys trusted us and myself, and when we cut a lot of staff because we thought we were innovative, there's better ways of doing business.
Right.
Hopefully you trust us when we're up against it and the work is just increased enough where our processes can only get us so far where you actually need more boots on the ground.
I think that's what I was asking. I don't want you to come here unless if you feel like you're up against it. And, obviously the county board doesn't want to have, anybody working, taking work home and we don't want to burn people out. At least I don't want to burn people out. And if you feel like if you need it, but, I obviously I want to hold things down, but if you feel like you need it, I guess I'll accept that. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on land services? Moving on to our next one, we have highway. Within highway, they have administration, maintenance, engineering, shop, and then local option sales tax is its own standalone, even though it plays a lot in the engineering and maintenance side. It does have its own standalone for us to track the dollars separately. This is one of those joyous ones where the increases don't always mean that there's an actual need for levy because we get state aid, we get federal funds to offset those expenses. So they do have an increase in expenses of $3.5 million for 2022, but you do see that non-levy revenue is also increasing significantly to offset that, $4.8 million there. That allows us to keep their levy flat for an additional year, staying at the $1.89 million that we had for 2021 and prior years before that. Some of the main things that help us drive that is our performance in local option sales tax. Just in June alone, we had $850,000 worth of collections. Comparing that to 2020, which was at $689,000. So we're still seeing that significant growth in the economy in this area that's allowing us to get a lot more revenue through the local option sales tax and put that onto the roadway. So that is in here for the expenses as well. Any questions on highway? Okay. Go ahead.
Well, so that large percent, that's because of the revenue, right?
It's an increase in the revenues as well as the expenses. So we're seeing that increase in local option sales tax. We're budgeting higher there. And then we see an increase in state aid and federal dollars coming in for projects.
Right. But what's the levy portion? Is that the
That's the
1.8?
0%.
Huh?
The 0%, $1.89 million.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They're not increasing their levy for 2022.
I thought, Tim Bray, you said that you couldn't continue on with that indefinitely. 0. Didn't you say that last year?
We hate when you use our own words against us.
I think I stood in this very same spot, probably the very same week last year, and did say that. This is an organization. There's We've met as SMT a number of different times, and the reality is that the pressures to get to the levy and increase the levy are greater in other departments. And although it is concerning to me, and I've expressed that to everyone, that I am concerned about not raising the levy. It just continues that the needs of other departments outweigh our needs. We are shifting more costs to the lost revenue that comes in. They are all legal costs, and we're going to continue to make sure that they're all legal to be able to do that. And so that's why we're saying 0 this year. I like to see it go up, but the needs are greater in other places.
But I don't want you to be the bad stepchild that always has to kind of cover for the other people. I mean, I don't know that that seems fair, does it? Or
From my vantage point, this is about using the funding stream that is most restricted first. And the levy should be the last thing you use. And so, Tim and I might not be on the same page on that question, because the revenue performance of the local option sales tax has been extraordinary. And so I'm not sure I agree with them that we need additional levy at the highway department. Now, that's okay if we don't necessarily agree on that. It is going to be about timing. And if local option sales tax starts to flatten, you are going to need to consider that if the other two revenue streams that we're dependent on, state aid and local option sales tax, falters in some ways, then you may very well need to increase the levy. Right now, the concern would be about CASA funding, longer term. We think they may have overshot the mark on how much CASA will go down. And so we're content at this point that we can get by with that much levy, but you should watch those other two revenue sources.
Right. And I wish government, not only us, but I wish government could plan out like 5 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, because you don't know what this whole thing is based on. To me, it's based on the economy. If the economy takes a dump, down we go, and then up we go when it comes. And it seems like it's a reactionary thing that you can't. It's hard to plan for. I just hope that we don't, with highway, we don't like hit a brick wall at some point where Tim says, oh, I need a 10% increase. I'd hate to see that. It goes back to when we were doing, I'm putting on my big boy pants and admit that I wish the last couple of years when we were doing 0 levy here, I wish we would have done a modest increase of 2%. I think it would have. Yeah, I know, Doug. Yeah.
Are you all right?
No, I'm not. Not really. But I just think we would have been better off at that point. But we're moving forward.
Well,
so.
and I hope what you guys see is we are trying to move you towards a stable levy strategy and something that you can sustain, that's politically acceptable, that reflects reasonably what our increased costs are without getting out of hand. Our strategy right now is to try to avoid the peaks and avoid the valleys. So,
and our strategy, Tim, is not only the lost revenue, but all the restricted funds. We're maximizing that before we get to the levy, because this is where it affects Grandma Jones.
Last resort. Levy is the funding of last resort.
Okay.
It is the most flexible funding we have. We can put it to almost any purpose we want. Always spend your most restricted funds first.
Okay.
All right, any additional questions on highway? Okay. Moving into community services. Community services includes the income maintenance team, their social services, health, and corrections. For their budget, we see a very modest increase of 2.53%, $790,000 year over year. If you recall, community services has been an area where we see significant increases in expenses year over year. A lot of the programs that they have put into place are helping us to mitigate a lot of those increases. We've seen flattening of out-of-home placement, stabilization of out-of-home placement, and other areas that really are helping them to bring forward a budget that is much more controlled than it has been in the last few years. On that, we have an increase to the levy of 2.47%, or $340,000 for this particular area. We also have increases in non-levy revenues as well. We see increased state and federal grants. A lot of them are pandemic related, but we do see increases there, and we're trying to capture that for 2022, that those increases are there. Some of the changes that are driving the expense side, there are requests for additional staff. They do have 6 staff members requested for 2022. 2 of those in MnChoices, 2 in children's mental health, and then 2 is health education. There are programmatic needs in all 3 of those areas that are driving that request. So if you have questions on that, Kara's team is here to answer anything you would have on those.
I'd like to have an explanation of those employees. So the 2 new employees that that I didn't vote for, but for the grant, for the homeless grant, those 2, that wouldn't be, those are in this year, they're not. So then,
Correct.
So that's 2 new ones this year, and then an additional 6 for 22.
Correct. Thank you for your question, Commissioner and County Board. So we do have 6 additional staff requested. However, 4 of those additional staff, the children's mental health social workers and the health educator positions, are fully funded, so there is no impact to the levy. And as a matter of fact, we will bring in a little more revenue with the children's mental health positions than the positions cost. So I want to call that out first. The 2 positions that are a bit of a draw on the levy are our MnChoices social workers. You may remember, we've talked about MnChoices a lot over the years. And initially with the MnChoices assessment, we were told by DHS that the funding would be 100% coverage of costs for those positions. And that has not come to fruition. We've seen about a 17% reimbursement rate for our MnChoices social workers. We have seen case numbers go up. And we have seen an increase in workload related to health, as you're well aware. I have each manager here today to speak more specifically to the needs for those positions, if you'd like to hear more of the story today.
So a question on this is, obviously, county government is a child of the state. The state tells us what we can and can't do. So is the state mandating or telling us that we need to hire these 6 new people?
No, sir.
Or have we made that decision? You've made that decision along with your team that you need those people.
The state is not telling us we need to specifically hire this number of staff, but the state does direct us to provide certain services that no one else in the county can provide. And so with the service and the number of cases going up, much like in Gary's shop with the customer service staff, we have legislative mandates that we need to meet in terms of timing. Otherwise, we could get dinged in our audits related to that, which would impact our funding potentially. So we have timelines we need to meet. We also have increased caseloads that staff are trying to manage, which becomes a bit difficult. And in the case of the MnChoices assessors, for example, they're spending a lot of time doing the assessments, managing the high caseloads, and not necessarily meeting the face-to-face contacts or the contacts that they need to make that we're mandated to fulfill. And we feel that if we increase the staffing number, they're better able to manage the caseload and could potentially bring in additional revenue based on those contacts. We did not include that in the budget today because I can't stand here and guarantee that that's going to happen, but we anticipate that that revenue with the MnChoices social workers could potentially increase based on their ability to meet with the clients more than what they're able to do now.
And I'm puzzled by it seems like you have an increase in demand. But if you go around Crow Wing County or go around Brainerd or Baxter, or if you walk into Menards, it's $18.50 an hour for a cashier with I think it's a $200 starting bonus. So I don't know why, how can there be that many people that are coming and asking for your services when there's a gazillion jobs? And I don't know why it would seem like if there's no jobs, then people would be coming and asking for help or services. Why? I don't understand. It don't make any sense.
That's a really good point, Commissioner. And I would see those types of services for the folks who are working to impact more of our child support and or income maintenance unit, right? So needing cash assistance or food support. We're not asking for an increase in staffing numbers for those cases. What we are asking for is an increase in our children's mental health social workers. We have seen an increase in children's mental health cases. You may remember a while back we carved out our children's mental health caseloads. We shifted those children's mental health staff to other areas because that's where our need was, and we moved the children's mental health work to community providers. What we're seeing is those children's mental health cases are much more complex, and our community providers are not able to keep up with the amount of cases there are. So guess who that falls on? That falls back to us. So we need to increase the number of children's mental health team members to be able to keep up with those complex cases. We also are looking to increase our children's mental health staffing number because we're trying to keep those kiddos from deeper end services in out-of-home placement. So that's part of the strategy there for increasing those folks. What we also know to be true, and what we've known over the last couple years, is that our aging population is increasing. And we've known that was coming, right? So in our staffing plan over the last couple years, we've had an increase of elderly and disabled social workers in our plan as we've moved forward. And we haven't added over the years. But now we're saying we need to add staff to this population because our elderly population is increasing. We want to keep people in their homes as long as possible and not go to long-term care facilities. So we need to add a couple staff to be able to keep those folks in their homes, provide those services. So again, that's not necessarily economic related, but more our aging population related. Finally, for our health educator positions, one will be specifically around emergency preparedness, which we've had a huge influx of work related to emergency preparedness. Michelle Moritz, our supervisor, has been our emergency preparedness coordinator, and she needs some assistance with that. So not, again, economically related. And our other public health educator, my apologies, will be around using SHIP funding and potentially pulling some of those dollars from our SHIP budget into the county and employing a staff person to be able to do some more preventative health educator work, as well as to be able to assist us with our BLADE work that we're trying to move forward. Also. So great point on the economic piece, and the positions that we have requested aren't necessarily related to that role.
So just a generic example for me, because examples work well for me, for my brain to try to decipher whether or not this is a good budget or a bad budget. So children's mental health, okay, so a child is identified somehow that they've got mental health issues, and then a social worker is assigned?
Yes.
To help that family? Can you maybe give an example?
I'm going to have Cara come up because she's a much better storyteller around this
Okay.
particular topic than I.
Good morning, Commissioner, and I agree. I also relate to stories and narrative. So how a youth usually arrives on our radar is maybe behaviors in school or disruption in the home. Might come in as an intake report. It might be the school making a referral to us. We do have strict requirements on the actual children's mental health case management. So there has to be a higher intensity of their behaviors and their symptoms for us to open up case management and be able to provide that service.
Okay. how do you know, how do you determine whether or not it's mental health? Kids are kids. I
Careful now, Paul. Careful.
I was, you know, I was kind of a hellion when when my mom and dad had a little
believe
trouble
it.
kind of keeping Paul in line, but my dad was a very strong dad, and so after a few, butt kickings, I understood which direction I was going. So is it always classified as mental health when it might be just you're a child?
Yeah.
I mean, you're growing up, and I know that when I was 16, I was way smarter than my mom and dad at that time. I realized that at almost 57 years old, that I didn't know anything.
Yeah, so I think you're getting at a very complicated question, and I'll try to sum it up. So there's a spectrum of, let's say, disorders. And maybe what you're describing is an adjustment disorder that is on the lower end of a mental health prognosis. So maybe a kid is struggling with being defiant, struggling with getting to school, has anxiety about interacting with their peers, completing the math test that's going to be coming up during the day. That's a skills-based. We wouldn't be opening those, or we have not been opening those to children's mental health case management. So an adjustment disorder might be that maybe parents are getting divorced and they're going through a significant change in their environment. It might be something adolescent related to their hormones and being able to have those skills to regulate, to get themselves out of bed and get to school and practice deep breathing before they have their math test, or asking their teacher, can I go into a separate room? So those are some of those maybe classic or normal examples of kids that go through. It's still considered mental health, some anxiety, some depression, but then you're looking at more of that axis two. So, okay, I'm getting clinical, but that axis two where we have significant impairment. So a youth that is having severe depression, emotional disturbances, they're lashing out, they're assaulting their peers, they're assaulting their siblings in the home, maybe their parents. They're attempting suicide, they're doing cutting, self-injurious behavior. They're not able to get to school, or if they're getting to school, their day is disrupted and they're ending up coming home. We're seeing these types of behaviors even earlier on, so as early as 3 or 4. We know that some of this is really trauma related. So the kids that we're seeing on our caseload are often families that we've had on our radar. And in fact, right now we have 13 youth that we currently are open with that would be considered disrupted or failed adoptions. So kids that have went through our system and have been adopted or transfer of custody with a relative or a non-relative home, and they've come back on our radar due to their behaviors. And sometimes they even end up in the delinquency world as well, or detention world, and then they're ending up back. So part of this efforts with increasing the children's mental health, so as Kara alluded to, back in 2015, we had a team of 6 children's mental health workers. We have a team of 3. We were very grateful to have community partners, 3 of them, step up and also provide community-based children's mental health services. We work very closely with those 3 partners, consulting monthly on the cases that they have open, trying to keep it on the radar if they're at risk for out-of-home placement, what can we do? Any of the resources that we have available, whether it's respite or the SIBS program, we're coordinating that with the community partners. So we work very closely with them. We have every intention to continue that partnership and have them continue to provide mental health services, because we do feel that's best for our community, that there's options. But one of our areas would be that when we do adoptions, post-adoption, checking in with those families. Maybe it's at 6 months, a year, especially around that adolescent, when kids, just their identity, and as you alluded to, Commissioner Coring, that's a difficult time for kids in general, and kids that maybe have been removed from their birth families. It's an additional trauma that they've experienced. So following up with those families, making sure, how are things going? Do we have services in place to prevent those kids from coming back in and ending up potentially in out-of-home placement?
Well, I just hope that, I've seen kind of a progression in my mind that government seems to want to be in everybody's business and too intrusive, and where government is dictating to a family on how they should raise their family, and I don't believe in that at all. That's their family, and yes, I understand that there's times when we need to stick our nose in there, but there's times when we don't need to stick our nose in there, and it's just getting where government is in everything in our life, and I don't know that that's a good thing. I mean, when somebody knocks on your door and says, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you, no, is what I say. So I hope we're not hiring more people to just then all of a sudden it seems like we hire more people and we find more problems. You know, it's kind of like a meeting that Mr. Hool and I had about somebody saying that, you know, Crow Wing County's not doing our job. And I said, we could hire 50 more people and we could drive up and down everybody's road and say, I see a violation, I see a violation. I don't think that's the kind of government we want. I call that Gestapo. And I just hope that we're not getting, I'm not saying your department is, but I'm just saying I just hope we're not getting that point where we got somebody looking over our shoulder all the time. So anyway, thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, if I could just clarify, because this is, children's mental health is a little different than child protection. Child protection, we are required by statute to, I think what you're referring to is knocking on the door, and it's maybe even putting our foot in the door to say, no, we need to connect today and talk about the safety of your kids. Children's mental health is voluntary, and for us to work with a youth in the community, the parents either request the service or have to be open to cooperating with us.
Okay.
Some of our cases, many of our cases, there is a parallel that we're together, and maybe it's a borderline child protection, but we really would rather go the children's mental health, the voluntary route, and engage the parents. And you know, we realize the importance that for a youth to be healthy and be the best they can be, we have to have those parents engaged and on board, whether it's with services, whether it's maybe changing in how they're parenting, or even co-parenting when it's two households. So thank you for letting me clarify that.
I'll just say on behalf of children's mental health, the sooner we catch it, because mental health is a long-term issue when it's diagnosed, and it takes a long time to impart knowledge of what they're going through, and so that they will continue to address their problems appropriately. And if we don't, we will pay as a society in a levy, whether it's to our sheriff's department or whether it's to the judicial area, we will pay a price regardless. So to ignore it and put our head in the sand is not a solution to the problem, but trying to address it as early as possible in their life is the best approach in my estimation. Now, the second thing I want to say, and this isn't for you, Kara, so if you want to go sit down, that's fine,
Okay.
is we're dealing with dollars here. And when we participate in MnChoices and we are promised, and I'm going to ask for your help to understand this, Commissioner Coring, since you were a senator at one point. I wish our current delegation was in the audience so they could justify to me that you say we're going to fund these positions at 100%. So we do all our legwork, we set everything in place, and then they come with 17% reimbursement for the positions. What a lie that is. And how disingenuous to us as commissioners, to the people of Crow Wing County or whatever county it is. When you make that statement that you're going to fund it 100%, but the current group and the past group come and do less, and we saw this with special education on the federal level, how does that happen? How do, as legislators, that gets justified? We aren't allowed to do that. We have to find the dollars for whatever we want to do. And we don't have those options to not do it 100%. If we said we didn't want to do any of these programs 100%, we would pay a price in Crow Wing County. You better get your guns on your hips because it'll be the Wild West. So if you can explain that, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I just find that disingenuous by the current legislature and previous legislators.
Well, I will say I agree with you. It is disingenuous. But being that I've been there and I know how the process works, and if you've ever seen it, it gets down, they'll go for 5 months, the legislature will go for 5 months, and it gets down to the last 5 days. And none of the work has been done the previous 5 months. So the work needs to be done in 5 days. And as we know, the state has to have a balanced budget. And so in order for the state, they're trying to figure out how to balance their budget, and it's easy to pass the buck on to the counties. And I wish when I was in the legislature, I wish I would have been a county commissioner before I went into the legislature rather than afterwards, because I never realized these unfunded mandates, how it has such a dramatic effect to counties. And I agree with you, Steve, but it's what happens is they want to get out of town and they want to get a balanced budget, and so they take the low-hanging fruit and cut that, and then they go, oh, I got a balanced budget, and out the door they go. So it's just, it's a mess. It's a mess, but it's the best system in the world, they tell me.
It's the best mess around.
Yeah, it's the best mess around, I'm sorry to say. But, it's just kind of like what I said about, I wish we could have a 5-year plan and know where we're going to be in 5 years. I don't think this thing is a 1 year at a time deal. I mean, if the economy goes way down, we might have to change something of what we're doing. It's just, government is a complicated issue. I don't know if that was a good explanation, but it's the only one I have.
Well, it's
And you
reality.
can
It's
put me on the
reality,
spot anytime.
Commissioner. It's reality, and I don't agree with it.
No, I don't agree with it
I think it's a terrible
either.
way of doing business.
Yes.
If I did that in my own checkbook, I'd be in serious trouble. That's all I can say. So with that, Nick, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, any further questions on community services before we move on? Okay, moving into capital projects. This is an area where we are returning back to our more traditional annual expenses. Within this fund, particularly the Fund 43, which is our CIP-related fund, we have fleet, IT, and facility purchases. But within our CIP plan, we also have non-levy-based areas, including solid waste, landfill, and tax forfeit. In your packet, there is the massive sheet with really, really tiny print that I tried to make as big as I could with the information that's in here. The very last page that's on there is your non-levy aspect for solid waste, tax forfeit, and landfill. Those don't impact our levy. As I said, we're returning to our more normal annual expenses. In 2020, we actually froze, the board froze the capital projects fund for us to make sure we had a proper cash flow in place to deal with the pandemic. As we were entering into it, we didn't know what the expenses were going to be, what the response was going to have to be, so we froze those projects. As we were developing the budget for 21, we were still in the midst of the pandemic and the masking and the other mandates that were in place. We did not know what that was going to look like for 21. So we tried to be very strategic in restricting how much we're going to spend in 21 to again allow us cash position to deal with any response that was required. So we were at 2.8 million for 21. In 22, we are progressing back to our normal, which is between 4 and 4.2 million. Right now, the CIP plan is at $4 million, right on the nose, which is a 42% increase over 21, but back in line with our traditional. You also see that the levy revenue is adjusted down $200,000. That is a reallocation of that levy to the general fund. In reviewing other restricted fund sources, to Tim's point where we talked about using restricted fund sources first and more unrestricted, these funding sources second, we do have opportunities, we think, within other areas to shift some of the CIP purchases out of the levy-based side over to a more restrictive area. So that's allowing us to reallocate that $200,000. We have the full listing of projects for you. I don't plan to go through every single one of those. If you do have any questions on any in particular, please let us know. We do have staff to answer those. Some of the ones that I tend to call out here are going to be more of our multi-year projects that have bigger price tags. If you look at facilities, we actually have 2 building remodel projects in the CIP plan. with $142,000 allocated for 2022 to the remodel of the first floor in community services. Due to the need of improving efficiency and customer-focused services, they would like to redesign that entry space to make it a much better flow for visitors and residents to the area. And knowing that the pandemic has kind of changed our workforce, that does include modifying the office spaces in the back to be more conducive to that remote work environment with hotel stations and different pieces in place. So the first year is a design phase. It's $142,000. This project is in the CIP plan long-term for a 4-year expense with a start in 23, mid-year through the year in 23, doing the actual construction work, a majority of it in 24, and then finishing out in 25. The total cost for that one is just over $2.4 million. And then we also have a finishing out of courtroom 2 in the Judicial Center. This is, again, a multi-year project. As we look at this being a limited source for us to go, we need to spread this one out. We do have it planned for the design work to be in 2022, and then a little bit of construction starting in 22, working through 23 and finishing in 24. The total for that project is $1.315 million. The remainder of the projects that are in here are more traditional, repetitive projects that we normally have in the CIP. If there's any that you have questions on, let us know. Facilities, IT, and the departments can help you with that. Paul?
Yeah. Sheriff's Department. So, jail body scanner, $200,000. I understand, and it says the reason why, but, I mean, do you really, is that something you really need? I mean, can't you, you've been doing it the same way, bend over and, and been doing it that way for years. Why wouldn't that continue to work rather than spending $200,000?
As the chief deputy alluded to earlier, Commissioner, drugs are becoming more and more of a problem, especially in our jail facility. We've had more than one occasion over the last 2 years where we've had to rush inmates to the hospital who've ingested something or tucked it somewhere.
Yeah.
We are not able to find it. When we do get to that point of finding it, it's almost too late. And in one situation, it was. So yes, it is a definite need. It's something that my staff are not capable of finding without having the equipment to do it. So it is definitely a need. It's not something that we just are on a whim saying we want. This is definitely a need.
Okay.
This is something that many jails around the state of Minnesota right now are moving toward. So I just got an email yesterday that 11 facilities across the state have just added the same scanner that we're looking to add.
So when somebody's booked in, they go in there and this thing looks...
This would be something we would use, excuse me, this would be something we'd use in our pre-book area of the jail before they're even in the facility.
Right.
It would be something we would do immediately after the officer brings somebody in. We would scan them. If there's something located, out they go to the hospital.
Okay.
So we're not even going to bring them into the facility to do the scanning.
This isn't required by the Department of Corrections.
No, it's not. It's also something that we actually need to get a waiver through the state of Minnesota just to do. There's a process that's quite lengthy to get that waiver.
Okay. Heath, I don't know if this is, so microwave radio replacement, is that, I know that I don't know if we had a personnel committee meeting, but we were talking about they wanted to replace all the radios. Is this what that request is? I thought it was a lot more money. I thought that was like $1 million.
No, the radio request is something that's...
So what's the microwave radio replacement? What's that? Is that for the chief deputy or? Well,
It is today.
It is today. To be quite honest, Commissioner, I can't answer that 100% fully.
Okay,
John Bowen
that's
is
okay.
John Bowen from our office, Emergency Management, is much more versed in that.
Somebody's raising their hand.
Jay?
Maybe Jay has an answer for that.
Okay.
But back to the jail scanner, if I can just add a tidbit on that, that is a huge risk management we look at for adding that. As Heath indicated, we missed, and we do miss drugs and things, and the ramifications of not catching those things is obviously a big concern for the sheriff.
I got a couple more questions, so don't go sit down yet. Okay, and then, and then just a question for Mr. Houle probably, or the chief deputy. So if somebody comes in there and is booked in and they do have some drugs somewhere and they OD and die, we're really kind of, are we liable?
I'm sure there will be a lawsuit. I'm sure we will be named.
As the lawyer for the county, I'm going to tell you not to engage in this conversation. We have pending litigation involving one of those things.
Okay.
And anything you say will be used against us in a court of law.
Okay. So this is kind of a preventative, this, whatchamacallit, yeah.
That's what we're looking for is, yes, weapons, drugs.
Okay.
Preventing those from getting into the facility, yes.
So this is weapons too, this isn't just,
Could be anything that anybody wants, and I'm sure Heath has all kinds of stories he could tell you over the years
Okay.
of things that have made its way into a jail facility. Yep.
Jay?
Yeah, good morning, thanks. The equipment you're in question is not the handheld radios that the officers use, it's actual the radio equipment in the tower site. The equipment in the tower site is getting out of date, and it needs to be updated. So it's more of the backbone of the radio system and not the actual handheld devices
I
itself.
understand.
We are talking about the handheld devices as well, and I think what we're trying to develop is a strategy that we could replace so many every year so that we don't have a peak and then nothing for 5 and then a big peak.
Right.
Trying to avoid that peak. So I think the folks in the Sheriff's Office working with finance tried to develop that strategy. We do have a 1/5 replacement of the radios budgeted.
So they're not in this?
1/5 of them are.
Oh, okay.
So within the operational
Or is it
budget,
1/4? I don't remember which, but.
within the operational budget, they did request $1 million to replace all the radios. We're trying to approach it as more of a strategic, long-term replacement strategy, treating them similar to a laptop. So we do have about $250,000 allocated to the operational side of the sheriff's office to allow them to start replacing radios and get on a rotation of replacing radios to keep up with technology changes, to keep up with replacement cycles. We know, just like computers, Motorola is quick to update to the next version, and then they stop supporting the prior versions. So this is getting us to a strategy where we don't have those, like Tim said, the peaks and the valleys of $1 million, and 4 years later, we're hitting $1 million again. We have a steady replacement cycle in place.
So just another couple of questions. So could you just expound on the rifle range improvements, building and site improvements at the rifle range? So I'm assuming that's down at the fairgrounds. Is that where the rifle range is, along with the handgun range?
It is, yes, yep.
And so are you familiar with what the improvement, what are you asking for? Because it's, I can't even hardly read this, it's so small, but.
I know that there's various improvements that they want to bring. The building itself is getting outdated. I can't give you specifics, Commissioner, on what that all entails, but building up the berms, making it a more safe environment for the shooting. That's our designated shooting area that we use a lot throughout the year, and just bringing it up to more modern day standards, because we've obviously used it for many, many years down there with somewhat modest improvements.
John, do you know more about that project?
Okay.
So there's been an increased use of that facility over the last 3 or 4 years for training and schooling and those kind of things. One of the things we're running into out there is the facility has just a holding tank. So this fund would also include upgrade to the septic system to put a mound system in. That would be part of this. The other part is that there's parking problems related to low ground. So it gets very muddy out there. County deputies have actually gotten stuck out there in the past in the mud. So this would be fixing the grade, put some paved parking in, also upgrading the septic system. That would be a bulk of this.
So it's 52,000, and then there's another one.
Soffits and siding.
Yes, 7,500. So that's all combined together?
Yes, sir. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be that expensive. I think we're going to come in pretty low on that one.
So John, do you, obviously you're going around and looking at the buildings, and then would this be something that you went out there and said, oh, I think we need this, or was it something identified by the sheriff?
This project was done by the previous chief deputy, and him and I discussed his assessment. I have been to the shooting range several times, and I agree with his assessment, so we kind of collaborated on that one.
Do we have, this is for the chief deputy, do we have other departments that use the facility, and do we charge for that? And how about the class at the college? Do we charge for that if they go out there and use that facility?
The one, Commissioner, that stands out to my, right off the bat is we partner with Central Lakes College, their law enforcement program.
Yep.
And they use it for primarily the month of June. And we do charge a fee for that service and things like that. I can't give you the exact dollar amount on that. I don't know if anybody has that number, but we do charge for that. And then
Okay.
the Brainerd and Baxter Police Departments have used it in the past, as well as our tactical response team, which is a multi-agency makeup.
Commissioner, you could be proud too, they actually collect the brass and turn it in for recycling. So we get some revenues off of that also.
Okay, I like revenue. All right, well, I think I can't think of anything. Go
I
ahead.
have a quick question. Is this the best location for this shooting range?
That's kind of a loaded question, no pun intended. Would we prefer probably a different location? Sure, but it is the location that we've had ever since I've been here, and I'm not aware of any other spot that we've considered moving it to.
Citing a new one would also be a difficult proposition in my experience. Shooting ranges are not well received in lots of neighborhoods.
And we did have that discussion, Mr. Chairman, before you were here. We had that, because the Fair Association would like to have that for expansion. And we did start, you remember that. We did have that discussion, and Tim Hool is right, trying to find a place for that. And then the expense of that was, I actually would prefer it be moved out of there somewhere more remote.
South Long Lake?
No, not down there.
Oh, not in my backyard?
No, I was thinking more out by the highway department, but you know, on that, there's a lot of open ground out there, but then you run into the airport, issues with that. So anyway, I guess that's where it's gonna be unless we figure out something different for it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we jumped a little ahead into the information technology portions here. There is a multi-year project for the EDMS document management systems. This has been an ongoing investment to continue to upgrade the document management systems for the attorney's office, for the community services and other departments. The total that is remaining in the budget at this point is $1.297 million. We're spending $475,000 for this coming year. Another item that is in here that I want to call out is we are investing in a budget management system. You recall last budget meeting, we talked about a budget management system and potentially trying to pull that in this year. We did include that in the CIP rather than trying to use fund balance this year, so that we have a strategic plan to put that in place next year. The whole purpose behind that is majority of our budgeting is done by hand in Excel. We do enter everything into our very fancy accounting system, but it doesn't have the ability to analyze or help us in managing the process of making adjustments and changes. They actually limit us to 5 scenarios for the entire year, and as we progress through, we use them up very quickly. So we do most of our work in Excel. This will allow us to do it within a true system that can help us with forecasting, help us with trending, and present a better budget that gives you a lot more detail. We would have been able to give you more detail today if we had a system like this.
How much?
It's a $130,000 initial investment for that system, and then it's ongoing of just over $20,000 annually for.
Is this part of the I don't know what you call it, system, I guess, that I believe we spent $1 million. Huh?
I don't believe is this a Tyler product?
This is not a Tyler product. This is an outside product that is specific to budgeting. Tyler does not have a product that is effective or efficient at budgeting beyond what is in our current accounting system.
Well, we're still using this expensive thing that we
yes.
bought for $1 million or whatever it was.
Yes.
Tyler.
For all of our accounting, for all of our normal reporting, for the year-end close, everything else that we do as a finance team is running through Munis.
It's gotten much more stabilized on the finance side than it has on the land services side, I think would be an accurate statement. Although I will say, over the course of the past couple of years, we have gotten a lot more stability out of the property records side of the Tyler system. So do we have everything we want? No. But do we have most of what we want? Yes. And so we continue to work out bugs on the land side. The finance side is pretty stable.
So it's working the way I'm trying to think of not a work order, but what would be something like another department would put in, and then it would automatically feed to your department. What am I trying to think of?
Are you thinking like an accounts payable, a journal entry?
Yeah, let's just say accounts payable, where the sheriff's department does it over there.
Yep.
They do it in, and they've approved it. They have to do the approval in that department, and then it comes over to you, and then you pay it, right?
Yep, and that all stays within Munis. This is specific to actually budgeting and reporting of the financial outcomes to you as a board. So it's helping us manage that initial budget process where we struggle to get everybody on the exact same page because there are different ways of looking at this. This would consolidate it all to one system where they get direct access, the business managers in particular, to do entries, to update, to run multiple scenarios. So if we come in at a 10.85 and we make adjustments and get down to a 4 in SMT meeting 1, we can actually put that into a projection and have that recorded of what happened to get to that point. And then if we get down to a 3.5, we have what happened, we can make another scenario for that. Right now, we do everything from the initial 10.5 to our 3.99 is all done in Excel outside the system, and then we'll go back later and enter it back into Munis, our accounting system, to be able to capture it there. This will allow us to capture it all within one system. It also allows us to take our budget amendment process, which is very manual and very challenging for staff to track where the process goes. That would run through this system as well. So you get more consistent look at budget amendments in the future for personnel, for operations, for capital projects.
Okay.
And then the other item that I had was jail body scanner, which we already covered. So any questions on any of the other IT projects?
None of these qualify under the rescue plan funding?
There is potential with many of these projects that they may. Like the courtroom is a good example. There is potential that could qualify for ARPA funding. The body scanner has potential because it does take temperature that we can maybe try and relate some of the expenses of that back to ARPA funding.
So we're researching that?
We're researching that. We're still waiting on final guidance. We have no timeline yet on when the Fed's going to give us final guidance. They did give us compliance and reporting documentation and guidance on that side, which makes it look much more restrictive than what they originally said it was. But we're still waiting for that true, full documentation on what the guidance is, what will truly qualify under each category. So we developed a CIP plan that fits within our normal budgetary constraints, and then we'll constantly be looking at what qualifies for ARPA funding. What that'll allow us to do is build fund balance here by reallocating those expenses to another restricted funding source.
Mm-hmm. That's the plan. So you have a $4 million budget for CIP. Over the course of the next 2 years, we will fund $2 million of it with ARPA funds. I can't specifically tell you which one today, because we'll just scour the whole list and look for what we can find that would be eligible. That is how we will build fund balance.
Commissioner.
So, Don, I've been scouring, trying to find something to ask you a question about. Yeah. So it's my understanding that you have a backlog over there. Yeah. And so Is the number $1.3 million for the judge's courtroom to judge's chamber hearing room build out? So is this going to help you with the backlog?
If you listen to the Minnesota Supreme Court, they want the backlog taken care of before that'll be a functional courtroom. So I don't know that it will, but what it will allow us to do, not knowing going forward, and I personally believe at least part of this is going to be ARPA eligible, it's going to allow us to build a flexible use room. So I'm not calling it a COVID courtroom, it's going to be a flexible use courtroom. So if you look at our other courtrooms, much like your boardroom here, this is a fixed thing. You can't move this around without really getting into it. All of our courtrooms, you know, the benches, they're bolted to the floor. Everything is pretty much fixed except the attorney tables. In this particular courtroom, the judge's bench in that area will be fixed, just like similar to this, just like the other courtrooms are. Everything else, including the jury rail and the jury box, is going to be movable. And so if we are under non-COVID restrictions, it'll be the same size. If it goes back to a 6x6 deal, that jury box will expand, so we'll have 6x6 capability for all 13 to 14 jurors. And that will happen by taking the chairs or the viewing area where the public would sit and basically shrinking it to nothing. And then we would reconfigure the tables accordingly. And then when that restriction isn't there, we would be able to put it back to the way it normally typically would be. So it's going to be much more flexible. Those numbers also include looking at how we can reconfigure our jury deliberation rooms so that you can have 6x6 spacing as well. And none of it's finalized yet. It was just we had Would working with us so they could come up with some plans and give us some numbers so we could give you some kind of ideas. So the actual designs aren't there yet. But right now our jury rooms are I forget the actual square footage, I'm sorry, but they're smaller than what we would need. And what we're looking at doing is taking the wall that separates them. So you have jury room 1, jury room 2, and the microphone would be the wall that separates that. Take that fixed wall out and make it a movable wall, a removable wall. It's not something that's going to go into the wall. It's something that's in panels that maintenance could take out. So you'd have to have a few day notice for them to get that done. But in working with John, it seems like that's very feasible to get done so that we could have a COVID courtroom with a COVID jury deliberation room and still be able to use the jury assembly room down on the first floor for jury assembly and meetings and other stuff, which right now, if we have to go back to COVID protocols, we'll be using that for the jury deliberation room again. Right now, we're not under COVID protocols for the trials, the felony jury trials. But more specifically, Commissioner Coyne, to your answer, it's not going to impact our backlog. That's a whole different scheduling system.
So as far as the backlog is concerned, so I don't know. I never go over there, so I don't know. So
You're welcome anytime.
Okay. So I'm assuming that the judges start at 8 o'clock and they go until noon and have lunch, and then they come back and they go until 5 o'clock at night.
Not even close.
Not even close. Not even close. Okay.
So court typically starts sometime between 8:30 and 9. We have just, as of July 1st, implemented a brand new scheduling system here in Crow Wing County, and we're still trying to work through the bugs and the pain of going through that. Currently, court scheduling is the bane of my existence, and I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but Tim's heard me say that more than once. We will be scheduled in up to 4 courtrooms simultaneously in adult felony criminal matters. And have to rotate between courtrooms. Last night, I think I got out of here about 5:10, 5:15 with my last court, which was virtual, because some of it's virtual, some of it's in person. Sometimes someone's in person and some of it's virtual. I don't think Candace got out of here until about 5:45 last night. They were running approximately 2 hours behind. That's a regular occurrence now. So it's... we are going back-to-back trials. We might have the same CHIPS trial schedule in front of 2 different judges, or maybe in front of the same judge, but one trial Monday, Tuesday, another one Thursday, Friday, then the next week we go right back into the next one. And so as we're catching this backlog up, which will take us at least 2 years, and the other stuff's still coming in, we're just scrambling the best we can. And that's not talking about the civil stuff that's all backed up too, because we couldn't do certain things during COVID as well. Land use violation enforcements and stuff. So what we've done in our office to try to address this is I've basically all but gone out of criminal court now. We have 7 adult prosecutors. We're at 6 because one of our prosecutors is out on long-term disability because of a car collision that wasn't her fault. Don't know if she'll make it back or not. Looking at how right now we're just covering that, trying to see what creative ways we can deal with that issue. I actually have a retired chief deputy from Sherburne County, county attorney from Sherburne County, who decided he was bored. So he's come in and he's just working on an hourly basis with us as an independent contractor, catching us up and all their backed up charging and stuff. So my attorneys can be in the courtroom dealing with the active cases and not doing the under reviews. I think we're up to July right now. So we don't have anything in our office, I believe, older than July that's waiting for a review. So that's at $50 an hour, that's a pretty good deal. And so I've taken over all of the land-based kind of civil stuff and trying to catch that up. I've taken over all the forfeiture things, and we've handed off most of my criminal stuff from my topical areas to some of the other teams. So we have team 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the adult prosecution side. Then we have our juvenile team and 1 attorney and 1 legal assistant on the civil side. Now I'm back into the civil side like I was 27 years ago when I started. And this position that's in the budget is going to be a civil legal assistant, because having 1 legal assistant doing all of our appeals, and we have 22 appeals pending in the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court right now, and we're too big for the Attorney General to want to do that to help us. MCAA has Scott Hershey. He'll take a few of them, but he can only do so much of our work for us. In any event, we need another legal assistant so that we can get the paperwork done and spread that workload out. You'd mentioned you don't want to see people working nights and weekends. Well, I've done it for 27 years, I can tell you that. And most of my people are too. Tim actually has often told me at some of the functions he'll see my lawyers sitting there at functions doing work, or going home after the seminar or on Saturdays, doing the work. And we have to be very flexible with my legal assistant or non-attorney staff because they're hourly. And since I don't budget overtime because I'm trying to watch that bottom line, we have split shifting, or we schedule things within the law and within the pay period. So maybe if they have to come in and work a little later on one night, then maybe they leave a little earlier the next day so that we can get the work done. So the position I'm asking for in 2022 is going to help us spread that civil side out and hopefully get a little more efficient at it.
How is this remodel, though, how is that going to help? I mean, is that going to help you, or is it going to help the citizens of Crow Wing County, so that if they have a dispute and they want to have a timely court action, is this going to be helpful to them?
It will give us the opportunity to have more courtroom space, so if we can bring in retired judges or if we bring in magistrates.
Okay.
But eventually we're going to have to finish the courthouse, the judicial center off anyway. If you remember when we built it, we shelled that on purpose, but all of the infrastructure's in there. So this is just finishing it off.
Okay.
And so the more flexibility we have, the better off we're going to be. During COVID, we took our courtroom number 1 and made it the COVID trial courtroom, because that's the best thing we could do, and we couldn't use it for anything else. And so we wouldn't lose that high judge by judge meeting space then. And I can't tell you how we're going to do this in the future. I think the virtual court's here to stay, so it's going to be a blend of virtual and in-person appearances, but I don't know what that's going to look like. It might be the AMs are all virtual and the PMs are all in person, but the courts haven't given us any guidance on that yet. So is it going to be exactly what you asked? Probably not, but is it something we need to get done eventually? We do. And if there's ARPA funding for it, which I believe there will be, then I think it's a good time to shift some of the actual expense to the feds and give us a little reprieve in our levy dollars.
Sure. Cool. Thanks, Don.
You bet.
All right, the last portion for the levy-based side for capital projects is our fleet side. These are much more of our traditional purchases. Highway does have 2 significant ones in here this year. They do have a wheel loader as well as a plow truck built into this one, but we were able to do that within the constraints of the $4 million and continue to do the other replacements for the patrol cars and for other facilities and highway vehicles. Any questions on fleet? Okay, and then that last page is the listing of projects that are not levy-based. There is 1.343 million, but these are from restricted funds that have to be utilized specifically for these types of purposes.
I am going to go back to the vehicles.
Yep.
And so if the Sheriff's Department can answer the question on what an administrative vehicle need is versus what your current fleet is.
What is it called out on, as the line item?
You have...
Ongoing replacement rotation of all emergency response vehicles for the sheriff's office. The project represents the purchase of a replacement of one patrol squad. It's listed as an administrative vehicle. It's
So one is aging out, is that what we're saying?
Yep.
We could get back to you on
This is
that,
following
Commissioner.
that replacement schedule that we have in our fleet policy, so yes.
Okay. No, I was just concerned that it wasn't a new one, just a replacement.
No.
It most likely is a replacement, but we can get you a more specific answer if you like.
It's a replacement of the existing unit 6221 is what it's a replacement of. So it's a replacement.
Thank you.
Is there a lot left? I have another question if I could.
Ask the question. We're here.
I guess, and this would be Kara, like I said before, I can't remember everything, but I thought we did a remodel in your department not too long ago because it wasn't functioning for you, and now I see a $2.4 million another remodel. What is up with that?
So we've had our remodel project on the list for several years, and we're bumped, so to speak, with the sheriff's office remodel. That obviously took priority, and so we've been moving this remodel down the road, so to speak. So a few years ago, what we did was we had a singular customer service window when you walk in the door straight ahead. That didn't function as we needed it to because clients coming in were lined up all the way out the door on our busy days. We had to look at a different way of doing business until we could potentially get the remodel in the future. So we closed the singular window off and moved the customer service windows to the left where we have 3 spaces for folks to sit. So you're right, we did do a little interim work in the meantime. Would you like me to speak more? Because I got a presentation for you.
Does the remodel impact the VSO office then too?
Potentially. We'd have to talk with Eric's shop about what that might look like.
I guess that's enough of an explanation, I guess, for me.
Okay.
All right, so that's our $4 million ask for capital projects. That moves us into appropriations should be next on the list. This is a listing of the budgeted 2021 in the darker green, and in the lighter green is what is in the budget for 2022. A few things to call out. The library did request an increase to $516,077. It is currently budgeted at our normal rate of $509,127. We are statutorily required to do our base at what our prior year was. If we do increase this, that will lock us in for future years to $516, but we did have it budgeted at $509, knowing the history with Kitchigami. The Civil Air Patrol also asked for an increase. They asked for a $500 increase to their appropriation. It is currently in the budget at $2,500. It is up to you as a board if you would like us to leave it at $2,500 or move it back to the $2,000 for them.
Why would you put it in there? I mean, why would you put the 2,500 versus the 2,000 in there? Because you didn't put the request in there for the library.
Knowing that this isn't a statutory one, this is one that you can move up and down, and the history of the Kitchigami Library for here has been to consistently stay at that statutory level. We felt that that was going to be the direction we were going to be told to go with this one. We didn't know which direction you as a board would like to go with the Civil Air Patrol, so we wanted to capture the $500 expense, so we knew what the impact was going to be to the levy for you without having to manually enter that in. So if we would like it to be at 2,000, it'll be adjusted right back to the 2,000.
Well, now you make it look like I'm a mean guy because I'm against the Civil Air Patrol if I want to take that out of there because you've already got it in there.
That was the request that they presented to us. So their request was going to be $2,500, whether we budgeted the $2,500 or the $2,000. That column to the left is the actual request that they made. So we would still have to tell them no to what their request was.
It's kind of 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. I mean, they requested the 2,500. If we'd have put the 2,000 in there, then staff's saying no. If we put the 2,500 in there, you at least have the levy so that you can make a decision about yes or no. That was really all it was. And it was $500. It's not, as you know, that's not material.
Well, I'm sure everybody on that list would like $500 more.
I'm sure everybody would want to,
It's just that we've stayed consistent with
They
the
didn't ask
numbers
for
for
it.
the past number of years, so
Yeah.
I just think if we approve that, you can plan on next year seeing.
We will probably get other increase requests to the
And
extent
again,
that
it's
you
such
approve
a
some.
small
because I
amount of
will
money,
point
but-
out the fact that the Crow Wing County Fair used to get 15,000 and now it's down to 7,500. And so apparently they did not get their submittal in.
You will notice, we have not received that
Well, I
request.
think that's an
Here-
oversight on their part.
Here too, we made a judgment call. It's included in the budget so that we didn't cut our nose off to spite our face, right?
But they've still got time to get their submittal in.
We asked for them to submit it to us by July 15th. We've reached out multiple times. There's been 2 or 3 phone calls to them, as
Well-
well as multiple emails requesting for them to fill out the form.
Don't put it in there then. That's a good lesson learned.
Well, what we have decided is, we think maybe the fair got in their way, and they actually held one this year. So we're going to reach out to them one more time after the fair is over, when hopefully they can take a breath. And so Nick will reach out to them one more time. But at a certain point, we would have to come back to you and say, we have something in here that's not been requested.
Tim, why would you do that? He's reached out to them several times. He gave them a drop-dead date. Why would you continue to reach out?
Because this has happened before. And when it's happened before, and we take it out, they show up. And we've put it back in. That's why.
I just think it's, you learn by
You-
the mistakes you make.
I would like to think so.
I
We
don't,
can- I mean,
I know
in
I'm
both of
mean.
these-
I know I'm the only mean one on this board, but
You're not.
you know
I'm
what?
the
If
one who
you
just-
reached out, and I love the fair, and I love all the people that are on there, but my God.
We can certainly take either of those two out, if you wish.
Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm the nice guy on the commission. I will leave them in there.
So what's the situation with the Brainerd Airport? And the monies they're getting and the funding in the future?
Are you asking about that 18 million that they received?
Yeah.
That's for development on the airport grounds, not necessarily operational, if I understand correctly.
What was that
Commissioner.
again?
The airport.
What about
He's
it?
asking about the $18 million that they received to develop the property out there. I don't believe that's to be used for operational monies. Is that correct?
You're
Because
talking-
we're giving the 157,000
$157,000.
that we give, and the city
we
of
give them
Brainerd
every
gives
year.
Yeah,
a similar amount.
And that's a joint powers. That's not it's an appropriation, but it's a joint powers between us and them.
So what happened was is the federal government apparently seems to be printing out of control, and great for us. We got a big pile of money out at the airport, and this money actually can be used for operations.
Okay.
And so every quarter, we submit a submittal to get our operational expenses. And so what we're doing is we're actually, and I said, what I would like to do out there is I would like to have the airport eventually be self-sufficient, where we have enough airport hangars, we have enough, the restaurant pays rent, the vendors that are out there pay rent, and it's actually a self-sufficient operation. And it's owned by us, the taxpayers. It's a great thing. Part of that money that is also going to be used for a new ARF building, which is a fire department building, which we actually approved the bid yesterday, which is great because it's going to be a local company. It's going to be High Tech for $14.5 million to begin next year to build this building, where the FAA is requiring that this ARF building it has to be right by where the planes land, so they can be out there in like a minute in case there's a crash or a fire or something. And so this is something that's required by the FAA. There's a lot of requirements. So we're still requesting this money, which is a small amount. It's still a lot of money. I think 155,000, isn't it, or 157. We're putting that in kind of a reserve account, and we're going to use that money. Like I said, there is demand for more airport hangars, which would increase rental income. And so eventually, we're hoping we can come to the county board and the city of Brainerd and say, you know what, we don't need any levy dollars anymore. And so that's what we're working towards. But we're using caution, and we're saying, yep, let's still collect it. And maybe in 4 or 5 years, we might not even need it anymore. So that's what's happening now. And we also did yesterday, as long as we're talking about that, yesterday we approved quite a large solar array out there that's the Brainerd Public Utilities and their supplier of power are going to put in, and they're going to lease the area from the airport. We just need one more approval, I think, from FAA on that. So lots of things happening out at the airport. So.
Okay.
The end goal, according to Director Wright, is to get away from the city of Brainerd and county.
Right.
And I think he has a good plan to do that, but the 18 million is what's going to drive that. And then revenues, like you said, Commissioner, the hangars and other business opportunities that they all have on the grounds out there. So
right.
I think that's a positive direction. We hope the 18 million is the seed money to get rid of the 157,000 every year, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, how much do they bring in now in revenue from what they have out there?
I know that we just passed the preliminary budget, and it's like $2 million budget. I don't know right off the top of my head the revenues, but our budget, which we just, a preliminary levy, our preliminary budget is $2.1 million, I believe.
Okay, and you asked for 157, so you're getting 300,000, so you must be bringing in.
There's a lot of money coming in from
5
other
million.
sources.
Okay.
Okay.
We actually, and one other thing, we're actually doing the restaurant is going to close on Sunday for 8 weeks, if not sooner. But 8 weeks, we're going to remodel, and it's almost $1 million to build out a new kitchen, storage facility, restaurant. It's amazing the amount of people that use the Airport Wings Cafe, which is run very good by Mr. Nisham. And so then, he's going to be paying an increased rate on rent. So it's just, like I said, we're trying to get it to be a self-sufficient operation, which is good for the
Sounds
taxpayers.
good. Yes, it is.
All right, so consensus
One
on...
quick thing, anything else? Because you always had one more thing.
Yeah, no, I watched Columbo last night, so I'll pass on that.
All right.
Consensus on the Civil Air Patrol is to go to the 2,000, to what our historical spend has been?
2,000?
Yep.
Nice guy, bad guy. What do the rest of you have to say?
I think there's 3 bad guys, it sounded like. One didn't say anything, and you told us you were nice. So.
Doug, Bill?
Well, I think we need to ask what the response of why the increase.
If you'd like, what we can do is invite them to come in and present.
Right. If they're going to ask for more money, I think.
That's what we used to do, is if somebody wanted an increase, they need to come in here and explain, and then when we did ask them to come in, then they declined to come.
Sometimes that'll change their request. It has in the past, and so if that meets your wishes, what we would do is invite them to come and present on why they would need an increase.
Let's invite them.
It's like the fair. We
And
need
I think
to ask them why they're not here.
Okay?
And
I'm
we can
comfortable
reach
with
out, we can reach out to them and invite them. We'll aim for the 26th to bring them in for that one. So we'll reach out to both of those to see if we can get them to
Okay.
come in.
The only thing is that it's like Doug said, it kind of sets a precedence. If we give a $500 increase, I know that the chamber would like to have an increase. They have, there these different ones, and we're not required by statute to give any of this money out.
So we're all being good guys as it is.
All right, anything else on appropriations?
Well, as the chief good guy, thank you, everybody, for being.
Yeah, I know you're always the good guy. I'll go tell them at Oak Lawn you're the good guy.
Okay.
You don't have to, they already know.
All right, final slide that we have in here is the staffing requests that are in the budget as of this point. We did cover a majority of them as we went through. The first section are new additions that occurred in 2021 that have an impact on our 22 budget. It was not budgeted for the 21 cycle, so they do increase our overall expense for 22. These were all board approved. There is one adjustment in here, the highway mechanic intern. On Monday, we were discussing that one, and that we believe that was initially entered into 21. It was actually entered into 2020. So that one can actually back out, so that makes the net for the beginning section 1.67 instead of the 1.87. We do have that negative for land services with the shifting of the landfill positions and the environmental techs. They were able to reduce 1 FTE in that area. And then we had the approval or the consensus on the sheriff's background investigator. That is a .67 position. 20,000 of that is covered by the existing allocation of funds for a contract for this year, but that does have a budgetary impact above and beyond the 20,000 for next year. And Sheriff's Office is working on their budget amendment to show you what that cost is going to be. Unfortunately, Dan, the business manager over there, his mother passed away last week, so he's not able to be here this week to help us with that. So they are still progressing through getting you that analysis. And then the 2 community services positions for that grant position, for that net of 1.67. The new FTEs are listed below. We do have salary and fringe listed for each position. That includes their health insurance, which we actually budget at the family rate. That is our most expensive rate. It's a conservative approach to budgeting these out, so we hope to come in underneath these amounts, but we expect that family is a higher risk for us when it comes to cost. And then we have the non-levy revenues that they are able to pull in for these positions to offset some of those costs. And then that final column, the net cost, is the actual impact towards the levy side. So you'll see community services, the social worker for MinChoices, having that 17% reimbursement from the state leaves $66,000, just under $67,000 worth of expense hitting the levy for those 2 positions each. The CRM developer, the initial salary and fringe is just over $100,000. IT positions are very expensive. There's high demand for IT positions, and that drives up your rates. We do have a plan here to utilize tax forfeit funds. Land Services has needs that they can have this position develop and work with them on. So we do have half of this position being paid from tax forfeit and the other half from levy. The customer service specialist, the first one, this is their normal allocation applied to that. They do allocate just over $27,000 to other more restricted funding sources. The attorney does have a plan to offset a portion of that additional staff member with $40,000 worth of funds for a net impact of just under $41,000. The customer service specialist, again, in Land Services, this is a little different in that they are able to allocate some additional funds towards this position to offset 50% of it. Unlike the other position, they have some restricted funding sources they can tap into for this particular position. The Admin Services Finance Business Analyst, this is allocating 80% of their time towards ARPA reporting and management, so we will offset this with ARPA funds. We are able to take administration costs back to ARPA, so this will be paid for. 80% of that position will be paid for through that funding source, another restricted funding source. Land Services, Environmental Tech Seasonal, this is a half-time seasonal position for the summer months. There are offsets with tax forfeit and other restricted funding sources to help them pay for a portion of this position for a net impact of $12,000. And then the remaining positions for community services, we do have the ability to charge their time back to the program areas for state and federal revenues. So they have costed these out and are able to pay for those positions with outside funding sources that are not levy-based. So our net impact is 11.5 new FTEs in this current budget. The total expense net cost is just over $400,000 for all these positions towards the budget.
Nick, did you say the 5 on top weren't counted in last year's?
These are new positions that the board approved throughout the year.
Well, then you kind of have to add those on to the 11.5.
Yep.
So it's more like 13 plus.
Yep, and that's why we put that in there for you.
Make
is
sure
to
you
see.
saw it.
Yep.
You know, what I would say is, we tried to go into this budget process, and what I was hearing from you guys was try to get a levy under 4. And so I'm pleased that they put together a levy at 3.99. To give you some idea on the FTE side, if you just counted the bottom of the sheet, the 11.5, that's a 2.4% increase in FTEs. Even if you count the ones on the top, it's a 2.75% increase in FTEs. Every budget that you put together is really about setting priorities, right? And so I don't pretend that everything you have here is an accurate reflection of all of your priorities, but I think it is a responsible submittal. And so I'm happy about that. I think you have a responsible submittal in front of you for a 3.99% levy increase and a 2.75% FTE increase. That's what's being recommended to you by the SMT.
And I think it speaks well of the SMT group and the process that took place. So I want to compliment each and every one of you for sharpening your pencils. When you started out at almost 11 and you got down to 4, I think that's a significant compromise that each of you had to make when you looked at your department priorities. So I just think that that should be acknowledged and appreciated by the board. I can see Commissioner Coring is smiling, and I took the words right out of his mouth.
You're right. And then whatever direction you guys have, one, you get to digest this for a while. So if you have something, you want more information, you want us to do some analysis for you, if you want something else to help you, what do you want in preparation for the next budget committee meeting to help continue move this forward? We'd really like to hear from you about that, not necessarily today, but after you've had a chance to digest it, give us some feedback about where do you want to go next.
Okay.
Okay?
Is that it?
I think that's all you have, right, Nick?
That's everything we have related to the 2022 budget. If there's any additional items, we are here to answer those as well.
Just one thing for me.
Does Suzanne want to address anything? Your first thing on the agenda?
Suzanne, if you had questions related to their extension portion, they were in admin services. So if you'd like to hear from her, she can definitely come up.
So where is their budget?
It was.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
I said where, I assumed since you were on the agenda that your budget would be in front of us, but I don't see it.
I just wanted to say that with the county extension budget, there's really only 2 line items that are of note. It's the professional technical services line item and the salaries and wages. So both of those are really personnel driven, and they are for the professional technical services line item, we operate through a memorandum of agreement that's created by the Association of Minnesota Counties, and it's commissioners that serve on that, and they create the 3-year memorandum of agreement. So in Crow Wing County, we have a 1.0 4-H educator and a half-time Master Gardener coordinator, and those 2 positions are in that professional technical assistance line item. So that's really what I wanted to just make sure that you knew, that it's not direct employees, it's through a contract, and that's how we operate with that type of work. We also have a SNAP Ed educator who does health and nutrition education, and that's a USDA funded position. So no cost for that one. I don't know, any questions that you might have on that? I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that's the situation.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add a little bit to that, there is a little bit of an increase to theirs. It's the contract with the U of M was held flat in 2021.
Thank you for saying that, good point. Okay, that's true. In times when there is something that counties are dealing with, not sure, knowing what the situation might be, in the times of when local government aid back in the early 2000s wasn't coming in, there were no increases for that MOA. Same thing, this last year, the Dean of Extension said, we really don't know what's happening in county government. Let's not enact that. It was going to be a 1.75% increase. So that remained flat. There is a cost of living increase built into this budget, and it's a 2.25% increase. So that is something that's notable. I will also say, too, that the Extension Office has had an increase, a large increase in the commercial pesticide applicator trainings. So that's a test that Extension staff proctor, and people come in, maybe it's Mosquito Squad or other golf courses, they have to be certified to put chemicals on the land. All of those take time, and we do charge a permit fee. It's not a permit fee, it's a fee, $55 per test. So in 2019, we had in 2020, we had 90 tests. In 2021, so far, we've had 210 tests. So we've seen an increase of about $4,800. So that's just something notable, unique and different. That's an increase in our budget in revenue. So something notable.
Thank you.
So I would encourage each of the commissioners, if we can give the feedback for this budget proposal, perhaps in the next week, so that there's time, if there's additional work that needs to be done by staff, that they have the opportunity to do that. Other than that?
We're in good shape on timing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Coring had one more thing.
Mr. Chairman and County Board, if anybody noticed, we have different flags here with the nice fringe on it. Actually, when I was a state senator, the local Legion and the VFW bought those at the cost of $500, and they donated them to my office. And so they were at home, and I thought this would be an appropriate place, so I'm donating those to the county. And I'm also donating my seal of the state of Minnesota that I received from the Department of Corrections, and he's holding it up right in the back there. I'm donating that to the county too. And I told Commissioner Hoag, no, I'm not dying and I'm not giving everything away, just this stuff. So
What about your
anyway,
election
I wanted to give
certificate?
recognition to the VFW and the Legion who were paid for those flags. And now it's kind of appropriate to bring those back home and donate them to the county. So thank you.
That's a cool thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as the board chair, I want to thank you, Commissioner Coring, for
Well, thank
your
you.
donation. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
They
thanking
look
me.
very nice.
They do.
And with that, I think our business is done today.